All right, thanks for joining us for this video recap of Axis&Allies 1942 second edition. We've welcomed Luther for the first time, holding down the United States, and we've got James and Carl holding up the rest of the Allied team, triple teaming me again as the Axis, and this time they managed to take me down. Also a first, we're testing out the National Objectives House rule for 1942 for the first time in live opposition play as opposed to a solo test. We might have some tweaks to them, but the basic idea is there's a bunch of different goals that each team can try to achieve for $4 a turn each. The national objectives gave the game an interesting start. Britain opened up by attacking Borneo and New Guinea to cut off the flow of oil to the Japanese mainland. It was an initially successful tactic. The Japanese were able to retake the islands for a couple of turns, but the American Pacific Fleet then moved in and retook Borneo and New Guinea and was actually able to build a factory in Borneo, powering a massive buildup in the area that ultimately won in that theater. In the Atlantic, the British played small ball for quite a long time, trading northwestern Europe and walking troops east from Norway into Karelia. That flow of troops made it down as far as Belarusia and the Baltic states. The Germans had trouble getting off to much of a start. They invested heavily in Africa and penetrated as far down as South Africa, but they were limited to the eastern coast of Africa by a heavy Allied American reinforcement that moved down to French West Africa due to an ongoing threat from a strong Italian navy. Eventually, the Germans were pushed out of Karelia by steady pressure from the Russians and the British, who were able to drop a truly amazing number of infantry onto the board thanks to collecting the Russian national objectives. So the Germans retreated east into Archangel and stacked there for a short time. Moscow continued to send its entire air force to the Caucasus to menace the Italian navy, and that proved to be a significant error, although ultimately recoverable, because Germany was able to sack Moscow, winning at the long odds at 15% on the battle calculator. The Russians and British were able to retake it without too much difficulty, and the Germans used the captured loot to build a large Baltic fleet. The Baltic fleet had some chance of pulling off a sea lion if it was left totally unmolested, but the British thoughtfully strafed the fleet for a round before retreating back to the North Sea, dealing significantly more damage to the German fleet than they received, in part because of a thoughtfully purchased British battleship. As pressure continued to mount on Germany, Japan decided that it needed to roll the dice for one last battle in the Borneo Sea Zone because America was about to use the battleship strafing tactic that had just been successfully demonstrated with its stack of count them, 5 battleships, even though it's 1942 second edition. And Japan was not